This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor Jon Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
Glad to have you here with us on the Retirement Solution with financial advisor Jon Hicks, who is ready to share some knowledge and information with you when it comes to the thing that I appreciate is what a nerd you are at all times, Jon. I love that. I love the nerd, the inner nerd that lives forever and ever on in your heart. If you ever see Jon on a beach vacation, trust that he will have, I'm not kidding, at least 3 or 4 books about economics or finance in his beach bag. That's what he takes to relax by.
There is sad truth to that.
I love it, though. I need people like this in my life. We all do, because it's getting more and more complicated to figure out financial circumstances. And then President Trump, the White House administration, obviously making a lot of moves. And we've been talking about things like tariffs and other words, other ideas that just haven't been part of our conversation. And you like to help people really understand what's going on. So what's happening with the market and how current economic could affect our bottom line, particularly with folks that are close to or have just recently retired. That's what I wanted to ask you about in this conversation right now, because if you look at the stock market since 1928, which is right before the Great Depression, annualized returns for the S&P 500 have been 9.8%. Goldman Sachs, however, is now forecasting that number over the next 10 years will go down to 3.1%. And these next 10 years are obviously vital for the group of people that's going to retire, the new retirees over this next 10 years, Jon. So what do we need to be thinking about then in this space with these kinds of numbers? What's the danger of a low or a negative return for retirees in their early years of retirement?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I know that I do the same thing. You know, when I'm looking at evaluating investments, it's kind of like, hey, you know, what's done real well? Let's look at, 1 year, 5 year, 10-year numbers, whatever it is. And then, of course, you just kind of want to look in general if the average retirement may last between 20 and 30 years, what would kind of be the expectation over a 20 or 30-year period, right? So I think a lot of us do that. That's not complicated. We look at those 401k statements or our Roths or our IRAs and say, hey, how did this one investment do versus the other? Well, that Fidelity fund did great, but those American funds did terrible. Why? We try to figure it out. The amazing thing is that what we've had a really good 12 to 15-year run in the markets. And so when that happens, is that a bad thing? No, it's great. Especially if we've been in the market. It's a really, really good thing. But what does that mean, though? What does that typically mean? And of course, Goldman Sachs came out with a study, and actually it's supported by the Stern School at NYU. Now, this is typically the information I look at. I kind of want the academic version to kind of get a gauge of things. So when you look back, because this was done since 1928, the Goldman information. When you look back at the Stern Business School, it does the same thing. It went back for the same period of time. And what I wanted to know, number one, what happens when you do have a good rip-roaring period? Does that mean that the market falls after that? If it's going to average a certain amount, how does that typically happen? And what we've seen in the Stern School verified this. So since 1928, there have been 7 10-year periods. So when you think about that, 7 10-year periods where the stock market did average 3% or less. Now, for most of us that are listening to the show, one of them is very apparent. They called it the lost decade. Yeah. That was after, of course, Reagan did his tax cuts in the 80s. Bush came in the very tail end in the 80s, early part of the 90s. And then we had the Persian Gulf War. But then from that point in time, when Bill Clinton won, the market, because of the tax cuts of Reagan, because of the advent of the internet, we had all of this .com stuff. Yeah. We had all of this technology that was being developed. We had the market go crazy up. It went from 1992 all the way to 1999, almost straight up. It was kind of crazy. Yeah. During that period of time, the stock market averaged nearly 20% a year over that period, which was wild. Unbelievable. One of the greatest periods that we've ever seen in modern history. Now, what happened, though? Now, it didn't have to necessarily fall apart the way that it did, but if we all recall, 1999 was kind of the top, and 2000, things started going a little weird. So when the stock market started going down, why? Well, because they started saying, well, things like petrocks.com shouldn't be worth $1 million or $4 million. Why are you going to bring
that one up?
I know. And they started paying it. People started paying attention. Yeah. It's like, whoa. What do you mean that company has never made any money, but it's trading at a really expensive valuation? So the point of this is, guys, is that when the market went so far up, it fell apart. And of course, we did not have Fed intervention during that period of time. We had not started printing money to throw at the market. We learned that later, okay? But during that period, the market went down for 3 straight years, 2000, 2001, and 2002.
Yeah.
The market got punched in the face for 3 straight years.
Yeah.
Nothing but carnage, red ink every single month. Every time you looked at it, you had $1 million by the end of it. If you had had just the S&P, you'd have been down over 50%. If you had owned any part of the NASDAQ, which right now we know is the technology index, that's what everyone wants. That's the one that's gone so gangbusters. That's the one that Elon Musk, promotes and all these things. Well, guys, it lost 80% from the very top in 1999, or really the very beginning of 2000, all the way to the bottom in 2002. So why am I saying this?
Yeah.
Because when we had that rip-roaring time in the 90s, that 2000 to 2009, the stock market averaged literally zero. Actually, it lost a little bit. When you put inflation in, it lost 3% a year.
Okay.
So why am I saying this? Well, because we've had a really good 10 to 12-year period. Right now, we're sitting on one right now. We have good double-digit returns. Everything looks really good. But this Goldman report makes me nervous. Because as a financial advisor, and one of the things that I'm trying to do is try to figure out, hey, what is a real rate of return that my client can get, or that I can get for that matter? What's a real rate of return that we can get that is not taking too much risk? What's an attractive rate of return? And Goldman comes out and says 3.1. The Stern study said 1.9% after inflation adjustments.
Really?
So guys, here's my question. When we're thinking about those portfolios, what do we have in our mind as the rate of return that we feel that we can get? If we have, we're probably going to average 10% for the next decade, if that's the first decade of your retirement, maybe think about that. Maybe get a second set of eyes on that. Maybe get a second opinion. Here's the reason why. Because there are ways right now, today, where you can lock in some really good returns, like 5.5% or 6%. I saw 6%, the security on the downside, right? When you can lock that in for a decade. So the question is, how much risk do we really want right now? Because what if the market has done really well? It doesn't fall apart. It just averages 2 to 3% a year for the next decade. Are you still going to be able to hit your retirement goals, right? Now, some people, if they have a really good strategy, they might be able to. They still could have no problems. Others of us that say, man, I'd like to retire maybe a little bit early. Instead of retiring at 65, maybe you want to retire at 63. Well, that means that there's more stress on that portfolio in the very beginning. Now, others of us, we want to also front load retirement. They say, hey, man, John, when I retire, I don't want to just go and chill out and, watch Outlander reruns on Netflix with my wife. That's fine and all. But really, man, I want to do something else. Like we want to go traveling. We want to go see the grandkids more often. I want to go fishing. She wants to go shopping. All these things. And they said, no, that's going to cost more money in the beginning part of retirement, but we're not going to be doing all that,
right,
after year 10 or 12 or 13.
Right.
So, man, we want to front load that retirement. We want to do all that fun stuff when we're the youngest and the healthiest. By the way, guys, I love that. I love that philosophy. I want you to have the most fun that you can have when you're the youngest and the healthiest and the most able to do it. I just don't want you running out of money in the end, right?
Of course.
But that's a different stress on a portfolio. If the market only averages 2 to 3% and we still have all the volatility, right? All of the tariff talks, all of the international diplomacy talks, all of our government's broke talks, all of these things, if all these things keep the market going up and down and up and down, we could lose. Right? So the one thing we have to understand is, what are the assumptions you're using in your portfolio? If they're 8, 9, 10% for the next 5 to 6 years, it's a possibility that could be the case. Here's why I'm saying that probably won't be the case. Because we're going to have inflation that goes along with all of these good numbers. If we have really good numbers, the Fed cannot reduce interest rates.
Yeah.
They cannot. We cannot afford to reduce interest rates, or we'll be paying $9 for a pound of ground beef instead of $4.50. We'll be paying $9 for a 12-pack of eggs instead of $4. No joke. That's the way it goes, because as prices increase, then so do typically stocks. So we have to understand that. So it's really important to understand, you have to understand your protections. So you have to then understand what kind of rates of return we can get, because that will dictate how much income we can pull from that portfolio. And if you think about it, making sure you're still holding on to what you got and making sure you can pull an income, those are literally those two combined are the gospel of retirement. That's all it comes down to. Protect what you got, make sure you can't lose it all, and make sure you can live off an income. So what we're going to see over the next decade may not be as good as we hope. So Heather, what I would say, everyone out there, know where their protections are and really understand your assumptions. I know people out there that have gotten 14, 15% over the last decade on their funds. They really have. But they've been relying on those magnificent seven, Amazon, Apple, Google, NVIDIA, all these great companies that frankly, they've kind of already done their run. The question is, are they going to still be able to make tons of money in this new era? Maybe, but maybe not. Yeah. It could be the fact that China has been slow playing this whole thing, hiding all this technology they really do have, whether they stole it from us or not, doesn't matter if they still have it. And they're going to be able to do things for a fraction of our cost, and we could see the market go down a lot more. So the understanding is, if you're not sure where your protections are, and if you don't know really what your assumptions are built on for your portfolio, guys, that is the number one most important part of looking at a retirement plan. Do you have a plan, or do you just have a statement? There's a big difference between the two.
You talk about protections, understanding your assumptions. I would add a third to that, knowing what your opportunities are, because that is an ever-moving, ebb and flowing situation. And so understanding current opportunities with higher interest rates, with inflation, with market volatility, there is always opportunities. So understanding what those are for you specifically is obviously a very vital part of a healthy retirement portfolio. Obviously, opportunities that you are ready to show with and for people. So if you have questions about this, seeking opportunities, no matter what the market's doing, no matter what tariffs are implying on your savings and investments, no matter what kind of risk is out there, let's get to work helping you figure these things out within your savings portfolio, a customized plan for you. Visit us at retirementsolutionshow.com. We also have links posted in the show notes. Again, our website, retirementsolutionshow.com.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with Jon Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with Jon and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting retirementsolutionradio.com. Be sure to listen to Jon's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Incorporated is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through J. Hagan Capital, LLC, NPN number 1882794.